Olivia smirked, as if the money was already hers. From across the sterile courtroom, her expression was a masterpiece of condescending triumph. It was the same smirk she'd worn when she got the lead in the school play I wanted, the same one she flashed when she announced her engagement to my ex-girlfriend, the same one that had punctuated every single one of her victories over me for the last 30 years. It was a look that said, "You are small, and I am not." The probate court was a beige, soulless room designed to strip emotion from grief, to reduce a life to a series of assets and liabilities. The air was still, tasting of old paper and cheap disinfectant. Judge Miller, a woman with a face carved from weary stone, presided over the proceedings with an air of bored finality. For her, this was just another Tuesday, another family tearing themselves apart over their patriarch's possessions. For me, it was the end of the world, or the beginning of one. Olivia looked every bit the part of the deserving heir. Her charcoal gray business suit was impeccably tailored, her blonde hair coiled in a severe but elegant chignon. She sat flanked by a pair of lawyers who looked less like men and more like expensive, predatory birds. They whispered to her occasionally, and she would nod, her smirk never wavering. She was the picture of control, of inevitable success. I, on the other hand, was just Samuel. My suit was borrowed from my one friend who worked in an office, and the collar felt tight around my neck. I sat alone at my table, my own lawyer, a young and hungry public defender named Miss Reyes, by my side. My hands were clasped so tightly on the table that my knuckles were white. I was trying to project a calm I was nowhere near feeling. My entire case was built on a whisper, a half-remembered conversation with my father months before he died, his mind already clouded by medication. It felt like trying to build a fortress on sand. "We are here to execute the last will and testament of Arthur Bentley," Judge Miller stated, her voice flat. "Dated January 12, 2021. Mr. Thorne, you may proceed." Olivia's lead lawyer, a silver-haired man with a voice like gravel sliding downhill, stood up. He read from the document in a dull monotone, listing the bequests with theatrical solemnity. A few minor heirlooms to distant cousins, a donation to the local library, and then the main event. "To my only son, Samuel Bentley," Thorne read, and I felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in my stomach. "I leave the sum of $10,000 with the hope that he may finally learn the value of financial prudence." A quiet gasp, almost a laugh, escaped Olivia's lips. She covered it with a delicate cough. $10,000. It was an insult polished to look like a gift, a final, posthumous slap in the face from a man who saw my career as a musician as nothing more than a childish hobby. It was exactly enough money to be an insult, but not enough to be worth fighting over. That was the point. Thorne continued, "All remaining assets, including all properties, real and personal, all stocks, bonds, and financial accounts, I bequeath to my beloved daughter, Olivia Bentley Caldwell, who has demonstrated the business acumen and familial loyalty necessary to steward the Bentley legacy." The words hung in the airless room. Steward the Bentley legacy. My father had never seen a difference between family and business. Olivia had been his greatest success, his little CEO in training, while I was a failed investment, a line item written off as a loss. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," the judge said, already looking as if she wanted to move on to the next case. "If there are no objections, the court will move to ratify the will as read." "Objection, Your Honor." Ms. Race's voice was sharp and clear, cutting through the smug finality. Olivia's head snapped towards us, her smirk faltering for the first time. Judge Miller sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "On what grounds, counsel?" "We have reason to believe, Your Honor," Ms. Ray said, standing slowly, "that the will dated January 2021 does not represent the deceased's final intentions. We contend that a codicil exists, drafted and witnessed at a later date, which significantly alters the terms of inheritance." Thorne scoffed audibly. "Your Honor, this is a desperate, baseless fishing expedition. There is no codicil. The defense is simply attempting to delay the inevitable and malign my client." The judge looked at me, her eyes lingering for a moment. She saw my ill-fitting suit, my solitary presence. She saw a long shot. I met her gaze, forcing myself not to look away. I had to believe in that one fleeting moment of clarity in my father's eyes, the day he'd waved a hand toward his caregiver and mumbled, "Anna knows, she'll make sure it's right." In the back of the courtroom, sitting on the hard wooden bench, was Anna. She was a quiet, middle-aged woman who had tended to my father with gentle efficiency for his last 2 years. Olivia had barely acknowledged her presence. I had nodded to her when I came in, and she'd given me a small, nervous smile in return. Now she stared at her hands, seemingly oblivious to the drama unfolding. She was the one person they all ignored. She was my only hope. Judge Miller looked down from her bench, her expression an impassive mask that I was beginning to understand was her defense against the daily onslaught of human misery. "A codicil is a serious claim, Miss Reyes. Do you have this document in your possession?" "No, Your Honor," Miss Reyes said, and I saw Olivia's shoulders relax, a triumphant sigh escaping her lips. Thorne was already opening his mouth to move for a dismissal, but the witness who does is present in this courtroom. Every head turned. It was a slow collective swivel toward the back of the room, toward the unassuming woman in a simple blue dress, Anna. She flinched under the sudden weight of a dozen gazes, her hands twisting in the strap of her worn handbag. She looked terrified, like a field mouse caught in the glare of a hawk. "We call Anna Petrova to the stand," Miss Reyes announced. Thorne was on his feet in an instant. "Objection! The witness is irrelevant. Miss Petrova was a salaried employee, a caregiver. She has no standing in this matter, and her testimony is hearsay. She was likely fired by my client for incompetence and now holds a grudge." "She was not fired," I heard myself say, my voice louder than I intended. Olivia shot me a look of pure venom. "She stayed with my father until the end." "Overruled," the judge said, her gaze fixed on Anna with a new curiosity. "The witness will take the stand." Anna walked the short distance to the witness box as if she were walking a tightrope. Her steps were small and uncertain. She was sworn in, her voice a barely audible whisper. Olivia watched her with a look of utter contempt, whispering to her lawyer, who nodded and scribbled a note. They saw her as I once had, a background character, a functionary in the play of our father's final days. Miss Reyes approached her gently. "Miss Petrova, you were Arthur Bentley's primary caregiver for the last 2 years of his life. Is that correct?" "Yes," Anna said, her accent coloring the word with the soft vowels of Eastern Europe. "And in that time, did you spend a significant amount of time with him? Every day, 8, sometimes 12 hours, at the end almost all the time. So you would say you had a clear understanding of his state of mind in his final months." "Objection! Calls for medical speculation," Thorne snapped. "Sustained. Rephrase, counsel." "Let me rephrase," Ms. Reyes said smoothly. "During his last few months, was Mr. Bentley lucid?" "Sometimes yes, Sometimes no. The medicine made him foggy, but there were moments, clear moments, like the sun coming through clouds. As she spoke, the courtroom began to fade away, and I was back in the stuffy, over-decorated mansion that had always felt more like a museum than a home. I remembered my visits, how I would sit by his bedside, trying to talk to him. I'd play a new piece for him on my guitar, the soft notes swallowed by the cavernous room. He would just stare past me, his eyes distant. But Olivia's visits were different. She would arrive with a briefcase, spreading financial reports across his bed sheets, her voice a sharp, urgent staccato as she talked about market fluctuations and quarterly earnings. She never asked how he was feeling. She just reported on the health of his empire, as if he were the chairman of the board at his own deathbed. I had thought he was oblivious. I saw now that I was wrong. He had been present for all of it, a silent, captive audience to his children's true natures. And in one of these clear moments, Miss Reyes continued, "Did Mr. Bentley ever discuss his will with you?" "Yes," Anna said softly. "It was about a month before he passed. He was watching the birds at the feeder outside his window. He was very calm that day. He said, 'They think the money is the point, Anna. They never understood.'" Olivia shifted in her seat, her jaw tight. "And did he give you anything that day, Miss Petrova?" Anna's hand went to her handbag, which she clutched on her lap. "He gave me an envelope. He made me sign a paper with a nurse as a witness. He said it was very important. He told me to keep it safe and not to give it to anyone, not the lawyers, not his daughter. He said the court would ask for it when the time was right." "Your Honor, this is a fantastical story," Thorne boomed. "A deathbed confession manufactured by a disgruntled employee and a desperate son." "Is the envelope in your possession now, Miss Petrova?" Miss Reyes asked, her voice cutting through the noise. For the first time, Anna looked directly at the judge. Her fear seemed to have been replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. "Yes, it is right here." With trembling fingers, she unclasped her handbag and pulled out a long, cream-colored envelope sealed with a familiar wax stamp of the Bentley family crest. It looked pristine, important. She handed it to the bailiff, who carried it to Judge Miller. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the city traffic outside seemed to have paused. The judge picked up a letter opener and slit the envelope with methodical precision. She pulled out a single folded sheet of vellum identical to the pages of the will. She read it, her face betraying no emotion. Then she read it again. Finally, she looked up, her gaze sweeping over Olivia, then Thorne, and finally landing on me. "This document," she announced, her voice resonating with a new authority, "is a legal codicil to the last will and testament of Arthur Bentley. It is dated June 7th, 2023. It is signed by Mr. Bentley and witnessed by one Deborah Goff, R.N., and one David Chambers, M.D. She paused. "It appears to be in order." Olivia's face was a mask of disbelief. "What does it say?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "Read it!" Judge Miller fixed her with a cold stare. "It says," she began, her eyes returning to the page, "I, Arthur Bentley, being of sound mind and body, do hereby amend my last will and testament. All previous articles of inheritance are hereby rendered null and void." The judge took a breath. The next words she spoke detonated the world. In recognition of 2 years of selfless compassion, tireless care, and genuine human kindness, qualities I failed to nurture in my own children, I bequeath my entire estate, without exception, to Miss Anna Petrova. I stared. I think my mouth was open. This wasn't what I'd fought for. This wasn't what I wanted. I had wanted a piece of my father, a sign that I had mattered, that he saw some value in me after all. I had wanted fairness. This wasn't fairness. This was a judgment, a final, cataclysmic act of a bitter, dying king torching his own kingdom so that his unworthy heirs could not rule. Across the room, Olivia made a strangled sound, a mix of a sob and a scream. She lunged to her feet, her face contorted with a rage that was terrifying to behold. "She manipulated him!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Anna, who flinched back in the witness stand. "She's a thief, a parasite who preyed on a dying man! This is a fraud!" My own shock was slowly being replaced by a strange, dizzying clarity. My father hadn't chosen me over her. He hadn't chosen either of us. He had chosen the one person who had shown him kindness without an agenda, who had seen him not as a bank vault or a disappointment, but as a human being. The money was never the point. It was a weapon. And in his last act on earth, he had aimed it directly at his own legacy. The judge banged her gavel, the sharp crack echoing the splintering of our family. "Order! Order in this court! We will recess for 1 hour to verify the authenticity of this document. Thorne, control your client." But Olivia was beyond control. Her perfect facade had shattered, revealing the grasping, desperate person beneath. The smirk was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly face of loss. And as I looked from my sister's unraveling to Anna's terrified, bewildered face, I realized the fight wasn't over. It had just begun, and it was no longer about money at all. The recess was a pocket of chaos suspended in the courthouse's monotonous drone. Miss Reyes was in a hurried conference with a court clerk, verifying the credentials of the doctor and nurse who had witnessed the codicil. Olivia, having been escorted into the hallway by a stern-faced Thorne, could be heard through the thick oak doors, her voice a shrill, furious blade of sound. I sat alone at my table, the world tilted on its axis. Anna was led back to the public seating area by a bailiff, who guided her to the bench at the back of the room with a gentle hand. She looked smaller than ever, a solitary island in a sea of polished wood. Her face was pale with shock, her hands twisting her bag strap into a knot. She wasn't a victor. She was a victim of a different kind. A pawn suddenly and violently promoted to queen in a game she never knew she was playing. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady, and walked toward her. I didn't know what I was going to say. Part of me was reeling with the same sense of loss as Olivia, cheated out of a birthright I had secretly, desperately still wanted. But another, clearer part of me saw the truth of my father's final act. It wasn't a reward for Anna, it was a lesson for us. As I approached, she looked up, her eyes wide with a fear that jolted me. She thought I was coming to accuse her, to join the chorus of rage coming from the hallway. "Anna, are you okay?" I said, keeping my voice low. She flinched. "Mr. Samuel, I did not know, I swear to you. He just told me to keep it, to be quiet." Her voice was a fragile whisper, thick with terror. "I do not want this, any of this." "I know," I said, and the sincerity in my own voice surprised me. "I believe you." I sat down on the bench next to her, leaving a respectful distance. For a moment, we just sat in silence, the distant sound of Olivia's fury a surreal backdrop. "He talked about you sometimes," Anna said eventually, her gaze fixed on the courtroom seal on the wall ahead. "When he was clear. He said your music was the only honest thing in his house." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. A knot of grief I hadn't even known I was carrying tightened in my chest. He had heard me. All those times I played for him, thinking he was a million miles away, he had been there. He had been listening. "He said," Anna continued, her voice gaining a little strength from the memory, "that Miss Olivia knew how to make money, but you knew how to make a life. He was afraid he had broken that in you." Before I could process this, the courtroom doors swung open and Olivia stormed back in, her face a thunderous mask. Thorne followed, looking exhausted and defeated. She marched directly toward us, her high heels clicking like gunshots on the tiled floor. "You!" she spat, pointing a finger at Anna. Her voice was low now, stripped of its earlier hysteria and honed to a razor's edge of pure hatred. "You think you've won? You think you can just take everything our family has built for generations? You are nothing. A servant, and I will spend every last penny I have left to prove you manipulated a sick old man. I will drag your name through the mud until you are a pariah. You will never see a dime of that money." Anna shrank back, her face ashen. And that's when it happened. Something inside me, something that had been dormant for 30 years, finally snapped. The younger brother who always stepped aside, the son who always accepted his role as the failure, was gone. I stood up slowly, placing myself between Olivia and Anna. I was taller than her by a few inches, and for the first time, I felt it. "Enough, Olivia," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made her stop. She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "You're defending her? She stole from you too, you idiot!" "She didn't steal anything," I said, my own clarity hardening into resolve. "And you're right, she won't see a dime of that money, because she's going to give it away." Anna looked up at me, her eyes wide with confusion. Olivia just laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Oh, this is rich. The failed musician is now her financial advisor. What are you going to do, Samuel? Start a charity for starving artists?" "Yes," I said. "Exactly that." I looked from my sister's venomous face to Anna's bewildered one. The final pieces of my father's puzzle clicked into place. He hadn't just given Anna the money. He had given her a choice. He had given us a choice. He knew she would be too frightened, too decent to keep it. He had created a moral vacuum, and he was waiting to see which of his children would step into it. "It's going to be called the Bentley Foundation," I said, the idea taking shape as I spoke it into existence. "And it won't be for us. It will fund music programs in underfunded schools. It will provide scholarships for kids who can't afford lessons. It will build community art centers. It will do all the things he called a waste of time and money. It will be his legacy, whether he wanted it to be or not." "You're insane," Olivia whispered, but the certainty was gone from her voice. She was looking at me as if she'd never seen me before. "Anna will be the director of the board," I continued, turning to the stunned caregiver. She'll have the deciding vote on everything. And I took a deep breath, will run it. Not for a salary, for nothing, because it's not about the money. He was right. It was never about the money. It was about worth. Olivia had tried to prove hers by accumulating wealth. I had tried to prove mine by rejecting it. We were both wrong. Our father, in his final desperate act, had shown us the way. The only way to truly inherit his legacy was to give it away, to transform his cold, hard cash into something warm and alive. "This is my decision, Miss Olivia," Anna said, her voice small but firm. She had stood up beside me. "It is, a good decision." Olivia stared at the two of us, this unexpected, unbreakable alliance. She saw the musician and the caretaker, the two people she had dismissed as insignificant, now standing as the arbiters of her future. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say. No threat, no legal maneuver could touch this. We weren't fighting her for the money. We were taking away its power. She held my gaze for a long moment, and in her eyes I saw the end game, not just of this battle, but of our entire lives. The smirk was gone. In its place was a vast, arid emptiness. She had lost more than an inheritance. She had lost the only game she had ever known how to play. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her sharp, angry footsteps echoing in the silent courtroom. The judge's gavel came down with a thud that felt less like a ruling and more like a final, unchangeable punctuation mark on our family's history. The codicil was verified, the will was executed, and just like that, Anna Petrova, a woman who had come to this country with 2 suitcases and a nursing degree, was one of the wealthiest people in the state. She signed the court documents with a hand that trembled so violently, Ms. Reyes had to steady it. Olivia was gone. She hadn't returned to the courtroom. Thorne, looking a decade older, gathered his papers with the grim air of a man who knew his client was about to fire him, in the most expensive way possible. He didn't look at me as he left. In his world, I didn't exist anymore. I was an anomaly, a rounding error in a spreadsheet of power and assets. Outside the courthouse, the city was a cacophony of life, indifferent to the quiet detonation that had just occurred in that beige room. The sun was bright and the air was crisp. It felt like the first day of a new season. Anna and I stood on the wide stone steps, blinking in the sudden light. She clutched her handbag to her chest as if it contained a live thing, a creature of immense power she was terrified to release. "Mr. Samuel," she began, her voice still shaky, "what you said in there about a foundation, about the music, was that real?" "It is, if you want it to be, Anna," I said, turning to face her. "It's your money, your choice. No one can force you." She looked down at her simple, scuffed shoes, then up at the towering skyscrapers that surrounded us, emblems of the wealth that was now hers. "My whole life," she said, her voice distant, "I have worked. For my family back home, for my son's education. I cannot even think of a number this big. It is not for a person like me." "It's not for any one person," I agreed. "That was his point, I think. My father, he spent his whole life building a fortress of money, and in the end, it was the coldest, loneliest place in the world. He didn't want that for you, or for us." She was quiet for a long time, watching the endless stream of people rushing past on the sidewalk. She looked from a mother hurrying with her child to a businessman shouting into his phone, her expression unreadable. "When your father was a little boy," she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips, "he wanted to be an astronomer. He told me once, on a clear night. He showed me the stars from his window. He said he gave it up because it was not practical." The revelation settled on me, a quiet, profound weight. My father, the titan of industry, the man who worshipped at the altar of the stock market, had once dreamed of the stars. He had buried that dream so deep that no one in his life had ever known it was there, except for the quiet caretaker who listened to him in the dark. His cruelty, his obsession with a practical legacy, was not the product of a lack of a soul, but the tombstone of a soul he had sacrificed long ago. The Bentley Foundation, Anna said, the name sounding more solid now, more real. "I think it should have a telescope, a very big one, for the children who want to see the stars." Tears pricked my eyes. I nodded, unable to speak. That was it. That was the perfect, heartbreakingly beautiful final piece. We wouldn't just be funding the future I wanted, we would be honoring the past he had lost. "I will need help, Samuel," she said, looking at me directly. Her fear was gone, replaced by the steady, capable light I had seen when she cared for my father. "I know how to care for people. I do not know how to run a foundation." "I'll help you," I said. "We'll learn together." We shook on it. Her hand was small and calloused from a lifetime of hard work. It was the most significant handshake of my life. There were no lawyers, no contracts, just two people on the steps of a courthouse agreeing to turn a legacy of bitterness into one of hope. I walked her to the bus stop. She refused my offer of a cab, the habit of a lifetime too ingrained to be erased by a judge's signature. As she got on, she turned to me one last time. "Thank you, Samuel." "No," I said. "Thank you, Anna." I watched the bus pull away, swallowed by the river of traffic, until it was just another moving box in a city of millions. I was alone, with a few $1,000s to my name and a future that was completely unwritten. The gnawing emptiness I had felt for years, the hollowness of being the failed son, was gone. In its place was a quiet, steady warmth. I turned and started walking, not towards my cramped apartment, but towards the music district downtown, where the sound of a saxophone spilled from a dusky club and the promise of a new song hung in the afternoon air. The money was gone. The family legacy was in ashes. And for the first time, I felt like the richest man in the world.